edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, we are now a full week off from the draft. Had time to think about things. We're hoping we'll take some questions from folks as we move along. But first off, it is a Sunday at noon, so it is officially noon. So it's okay to drink. And I started out with just a little old Sam Adams Boston Lager. How about yourself?
I have a Perlenbacher Hefeweizen. So
nice.
Seems summery to me, springy and summery. I'm
Nice.
still excited. I still a week away from past the draft. I'm still excited. I'm still I've got that post-draft sort of let down a little bit, but I'm checking out clips, checking out interviews. So I'm still very excited about our draft. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, the further we get away from it, the more excited I've actually gotten about it. Mm-hmm. Just thinking about the way the team's kind of shaping up and, try not to be, you want to be optimistic, right? That's one thing we joked about last time. It was Big Blue Optimistic Interactive. It's another thing to be like, oh, we're just going to go win playoff. I'm not saying that, but there's something about the makeup of this team, just the players themselves, right? Like, it just seemed like there's just a new vibe, and maybe you nailed it last time, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but maybe the carcass of Daniel Jones just not being here, just the whole weight. I think you used carcass last time. The whole weight of that situation that has officially been moved off, right? Whatever happens now. Whether if they win or they lose, this will be a Dayball Shane thing for sure. You no longer have the Jones positive or negative impact. It's gone. It just feels refreshing now. And I think the draft really, I like the mesh of players that we got.
Carcass isn't part of my lexicon, but I'll take credit for it. That's actually, there's two things with that. And I'm glad you actually brought that up. Again, you and I don't coordinate in advance on what we're going to talk about. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is how this draft class brings an edge to the Giants. And people say stuff like that all the time. But as I was going back and watching clips and listening to interviews, and by the way, if people haven't seen it, go and watch Gruden's quarterback class or whatever they call it with Jackson Dart. It's really worth the watch to go back. And it's about, I think it's like 50 minutes, 40 minutes, but it's really worth watching that to get a sense of his personality. But if you go back and watch the Scadaboo highlights and you watch the Carter and Alexander highlights and you listen to them, they bring an edge and confidence to this team that is sorely lacking. So again, they're rookies, and rookies don't usually carry a lot of weight in the locker room, but we'll see this team, I think, is starved for leadership. And Jackson Dart, the more I listen to him, I'm not talking about the on the field stuff right now. The more I listen to him, and what he did when he was at Ole Miss and bringing people into that program through the transfer portal, calling people, making sure they responded well to losses and victories. It just, he is the anti Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones was, to me, just a blah player. He was just a blank screen, a blank, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. It just didn't give off a lot of confidence. Dart, I know you're old enough to remember that Phil Simms used to be a pretty fiery guy.
Yes.
And especially in his early years, he was very demonstrative, when they scored a touchdown, and he wasn't like Eli. Eli was, again, pretty low key. When the Giants did something really well on the field, when Phil Simms made a great pass, he let you know it. Jackson Dart's a lot like that. So we're going to have a very different vibe from him, but I also think we're going to have a different vibe because of Scadaboo too on the offense. And so I'm glad you brought up the Daniel Jones thing. And again, it sounds like I'm piling on, but the Daniel Jones era being over has really got me more interested in the New York Giants this year, which is sad to say because I run the Giants website. It's he's gone, and we don't have. It was just like this albatross that was hanging over the Giants, and now he's gone.
Yeah, it's funny too, the way you mentioned it. It's a good point about Phil Simms. People forget he'd run down the field, he'd be pumping like this, and he's pointing, he's yelling and screaming, and it wasn't manufactured. Like it
No,
wasn't just something.
no.
Keep in mind, there wasn't, there's not all the stuff that we have today. There's not the TikToks and the social medias and the memes and all that stuff. This was just a guy that was pretty fired up, and he would be very fired up when something bad would happen.
Ronnie Lott, remember when he got into it with Ronnie Lott after the
chin strap went back on?
Yeah.
They're going head to head.
Yeah.
The difference with Daniel Jones, again, we're gonna say these few things, and then we're not gonna talk about him again. The difference with Daniel Jones is the fact that after the first couple of seasons, and welcome aboard, Deb Ellis. Thank you for new listener, new viewer,
first time caller.
The thing with Daniel Jones is, like, after the first couple of years, right, there was just this almost expectation of when was the bad thing going to happen, and that you almost got that feeling from him. Like when he would come on the field, you were just waiting, and the crowd was waiting for when was the bad thing going to happen. And there was glimpses and teases every now and then of a few plays, lots of times with his legs. But after the 23 season and then rolling into 24, the first drive of Houston Texan preseason game was like, oh my God, if that wasn't an actual premonition, just a microcosm of what the entire season was going to look like, then you fast forward to the Vikings game, the first series. What were we? Second down. We were like 2nd and 16. You just knew it was the air just came out. It was literally like an underinflated balloon actually was able to lose even more air. It was that bad.
Well, we as fans didn't have a lot of confidence in him, and you have to think that his teammates kind of picked up on that, or some of them felt the same way too. So there again, this thing with Gruden and Dart is really interesting because he shows clips of Dart on the sidelines. Like there's one clip where Dart is sitting on the bench and he's yelling, and Drew Gruden's like, "What are you so pissed off about here? Why are you so upset?" And he said, "Well, we had 4th and goal and we didn't score, and I was really pissed off about that." And Gruden loves the passion, but he's also telling him, you got to rein some of this in. But that was a little bit like Phil, like you said, it wasn't manufactured. It was that's just the way he was, and fans kind of feed off of that. So I know I did as a fan. Phil Simms still to this day is probably my favorite New York Giant, and that includes Lawrence Taylor and Eli Manning. Phil is probably still my favorite, and part of it was I was rooting for him as the guy that people counted out, and I really liked his personality. And so Daniel was just so boring to me, and I see a little bit of Phil Simms's personality in Dart. That's what came across to me as I've been watching these interviews. He's got to ditch the glasses.
Elton John picked him up and took him back, and we're
he's
good.
Got to ditch those. But I think I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited watching clips of Scattaboo, and it's not just the way he runs; it's when he picks himself off the ground and he's sort of looking off into the distance and like, what are you gonna do about it? You can't stop this. You hit me and it doesn't, and he lays a shoulder into somebody and he just brings some toughness. And again, I don't think people like Scattaboo and Dart are going to be intimidated by the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles are probably going to beat them because they're a better team right now, but I don't think they're going to take it very well. And I don't think they're going to back down. And I expect those games to be a lot closer. So I also found it interesting. There's a long-standing history now. I shouldn't say long-standing, but there is a history between Jayden Daniels and Dart, both when they were both out west, and then when they came out east, playing against each other in college, and sort of a back and forth, a mini rivalry, if you will. And as I'm watching this, well, that's interesting. This is going to continue. So I just like the attitude that they brought up, and we'll get into the picks and all that stuff. And I'd like to. There's something I do. I said I wouldn't do this, but more stuff has come out in between the Shedeur and the Dart. Why did the Giants shift? And I think we should talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, I just want to touch on one thing you just said. And I won't say wins, losses, whatever. I don't know. None of us know. But the one thing that the Giants really lacked, right? They went into games, and let's use Philadelphia and even Dallas. Let's use Dallas as well. All of us as fans went in going, oh my God, could we please just don't get embarrassed? That's where we were at. Don't get embarrassed. It wasn't, we're going to beat the Eagles. We're going to beat the Cowboys. It was, don't get embarrassed. And I feel like the players almost went into a lot of those games with the idea that we're probably not going to win. Like they just lacked any confidence. I don't like a team full of attitude guys, like just show offy attitude. Like I don't want a bunch of CD Lambs who want to just, first down. I don't need that crap. But I do want guys that are fiery. I want guys that are going to be like, if you hit them a little bit extra, they're going to get right back up in your face. Because too often we saw our guys would get kind of knocked to the ground and stuff, and we'd be standing around. The days of, and I don't even have to go back to the 80s. Let's go back to the early 2000s. You did that. Let's say you hit Tiki Barber a little extra. You were going to get a Jeremy Shockey. You were going to get a Kareem McKenzie. You were going to get a Richie Cyber. You were going to get somebody was going to come over and probably put you on the ground for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
We had too many guys who just kind of like, we really were soft. And the other teams, the Eagles and their lines, both sides, beat up on us. And it's not just that we weren't talented. There's a mental piece to that as well. And I have a feeling we've changed a little bit of that attitude. I think with the Wilson and Winston coming in as veterans, that changes things a little bit. Dart is obviously the future. He's got to prove it, but that's what they drafted him for. That kind of piece. Scadaboo's going to be a guy who's going to get used. They didn't draft him to hope he makes the team. That's not the way this is going to go. So you're looking at some attitude guys, and I think Darius Alexander is another guy we want to put in that group as well. That's some more attitude. So that's what I think we want to look for is what do these young guys bring, and then some of the veterans that we added, and just a change in mentality. And I think the feel of that, we will know very early on if it's a legitimate thing or just fan speak when we talk about it now.
And I want to answer Paul's question, but one last thing on what you just said too. So the interesting dynamic moving forward is going to be this will not become Jackson Dart's team until Russell Wilson is out of the picture next year. So Jackson may end up playing some this year towards the end of the year. Maybe we'll see how it goes, but it can't really become his team until, and he shouldn't try. And I think he knows that, because I think I saw one interview in a different situation when he was in college someplace, and he knew there's a time and a place to make it your team. So this is Russell Wilson's team right now. So I think we're going to see some of this year. I think the fruit from this we won't see fully until next year. Some of this we'll see this year. The Scadaboo stuff. Again, no one's talking. No one. It's really weird. We drafted Abdul freaking Carter, and no one's talking about him. I mean, it's right. It's really
That's
strange. Now, Paul, on Dave Brown, what was interesting, again, you got to remember the time period that this happened. There was no internet. You didn't wake up in the morning and have an iPhone or your computer and find out the latest news. So this was a time when I was in my early 20s. I didn't even know that there was a supplemental draft. So you pick up the paper and you found out the Giants drafted a quarterback after the draft, and they gave up their first round pick, and it was for a quarterback from Duke. So it was really weird. So we all kind of knew we needed our quarterback of the future. And so, Sims, I think both. When did Hostetler actually that offseason leave? Did he leave before? It was after Dave Brown was picked, right?
It was after 92, because Sims became the starter again in 93.
Right, but Dave Brown was taken in the supplemental draft in 92, right?
So he was third string, and Hostetler was still there.
So Hostetler and Sims were still there, and they had drafted Dave Brown. So it was really weird. Side story on this is when I finally met my future wife around 98, 99, and she had to get caught up on Giants history. I told her about Dave Brown, and she said, "Who the hell drafts a quarterback from Duke?" So she was around for Daniel Jones getting drafted, and she said, "What the hell are they doing? Who drafts a quarterback? It's a basketball school. What do you?" She's a big basketball fan, so she
doubled down on it.
So like, what are you doing? So she knew, and she also knew about Shador, by the way. She had real bad vibes about that too. So
and the thing is, with the 92 piece, to finish that up, remember the Giants came off the really poor showing of 91, right? So 92, you were thinking, okay, they're going to rebound. You've got he who shall not be named, his second year coaching. Things will be a little bit better. The Giants were hoping that they could really kind of move forward now, and it just didn't work. There was a lot of infighting. The defense was really pissed off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Rod Russ the defensive coordinator at that time? I think he was.
Yeah.
Um,
Rod Russ's son used to post on BBI, by the way.
yeah, and the defensive team was really pissed off at him. It was just a nightmare. So you had a team that drafted a quarterback, and this is a really interesting scenario. It kind of goes with this scenario, right? You had a team that drafted a quarterback in a supplemental draft, and they with a coach that was on thin ice, and that coach then gets canned. A whole new coach comes in who really did not want to play Dave Brown.
Right.
Sims becomes the starter again. He brings in, we became the New Jersey Broncos basically.
They got rid of Pepper Johnson. They got rid of Ed McCaffrey.
So you brought in Brooks, the linebacker, Jackson, the wide receiver, Marshall, the wide receiver. We were bringing in all these guys from Denver. So in reality, there's a very similar piece that I hope does not play out that way here. I gotta hope Daboll is on a much more solid ground than he who shall not be named was on in his second year.
Yeah. And I want to bring this up too. So let me watch this clip.
We should spend a minute talking about the Jackson Dart, the decision effectively at which quarterback they were going to go with, because there were reports. I think McShay had the report saying that that Shadour's interview with the Giants effectively was a train wreck, that they'd given him installed homework and he basically didn't do it, showed up. The report was that Daboll called him on not doing the homework. Shadour did not appreciate being called on it, and Brian Daboll did not appreciate him not appreciating them being called on. The whole thing went terribly, right? There were also reports before that the Giants were split as an organization, right? Some of the organization wanted Shadour, some of them wanted no part of it, and I wonder if that report is part of that. Ultimately, they end up going with Jackson Dart, but I do wonder if how close they were to Shadour at any point, and where, if ever, that unraveled.
So this to me still fascinates me. So the question is we don't know, was Shadour a smokescreen? Was he not a smokescreen? And they were all in on it until the last, or many of the people in the front office were all in on him until the end. Was it these interviews? Was that it? Because there's another report from Albert Breer that didn't go exactly what McShay said. They're saying it's similar, that the interview did not go well, but the Giants had put in stuff on the install that was deliberately sort of supposed to throw Shadour and see how he reacted to it, and he didn't care for that, and he was pissed off about that. So, but the one constant seems to be he did not interview at all well, and we saw a little bit of what the interviews are a little bit like in Hard Knocks from the previous year when he was sitting down with the quarterbacks. So there is a process that they have in place where they like to test the mental abilities of the quarterback, and it sounds like Shadour didn't want to do it, or he didn't like it, or he just didn't handle it well. And so the question is, and throw this at you, John, smokescreen, they changed their mind. There was a split camp, and Daboll won. That to me is the fascinating. I don't want to spend a lot of time on Shadour, but it's interesting that it was Shadour, and then all of a sudden it was Dart. And was it really these interviews that caused the Giants not only to look one way, but then caused maybe some other teams to go, wait, there is something else here too. Maybe they had the same problem, and that's why he dropped.
I think there was legitimate interest through the season. You don't go out there that many times if you're not legitimately interested. If it was just the Giants, I would say something happened and the Giants soured on him, and that it was only the Giants. He dropped to the 5th round.
Right.
The rumors that I've seen so far that have been out there, a couple things. And first, I'll start with what you said, and I'll just add a tiny bit to it. So the Giants give you the plays that they're going to then have you draw up. Right. They gave him the plays. When he shows up for the interview, they give him one of the plays with intentionally some of it wrong, to see if he had studied the plays that they gave him and he would identify what was wrong from what they gave him. He didn't. And he got really mad at that when Dayball called him out on it. That's the rumor that was.
Well, that's one of the rumors. The other rumor is he didn't even do the homework. So it's one of the other.
I mean, I guess it's just kind of the same thing, because you would have known they gave you the wrong stuff if you had looked at the plays. The other thing that I've been reading on is that with some of the other teams, he went into some of these interviews where he was interviewing them, almost like, what are you going to do to support me? And to some of them, it became very disrespectful, they thought, in that you're trying to sell yourself to us, but at the same time, you're telling us all the things that you would want to have changed. And it threw a lot of teams off and you could see this whole idea that people are bringing up race. Cam Ward's black. He was a number 1 draft pick here. I mean, it has nothing to do with race.
No, and the Giants tried to trade up for Cam Ward, and the Giants tried to trade up for Cam Ward.
And I don't think it's just with the Giants. I mean, they're bringing it up in general with the NFL. Something seriously went wrong in those interviews, and the attitude piece of it. Now, I don't know Shedeur from anybody. Obviously, I've seen him. He is a very confident person. Some would say almost overconfident to a degree. If you look at what your success rate was on the field. You played at Jackson State and you played at Colorado. You didn't play at LSU. You didn't play at Alabama. You didn't play at Georgia. You didn't play those teams, and you barely had a winning record. So it's a little hard to just walk in like you're going to change the fridge, because the one thing that he leaves out when he says, look at what I've done and everywhere I've been, who else did you go with? Oh, that's right. Your dad was the coach in each one of those spots. And I think a lot of teams got really leery and weary of, geez, if we bring this guy on board and he's got this attitude of like things got to change, it's coming from his dad too, so there's this whole thing. What's going to happen when you're not the top dog, when your dad's not your coach? That's a legitimate thing. So I think
that's
the Giants
part of it. I think that's a big part of it was the dad factor.
Yeah, I think the Giants were legitimately interested, but I don't think the difference between Sanders and Dart was that big of a difference early on. I think they were probably a lot closer. And then as the interview pieces came about, I think Dayball just got his guy. He said, this is the guy that I'm comfortable with.
Well, we'll never know. Wait, before I say that, I think what you said was spot on. I saw somebody else, I'm not going to take credit for it, but it was really well said, who said he did not treat it as an interview. He treated it as a recruiting process like they do in college. Right. So he went in there, like you said, what are you going to do for me, rather than, one of my first interviews I ever had when I was, again, a young man, and it was kind of similar to this. The guy that was interviewing tried to put me on the spot. We were supposed to provide a writing sample, and I gave him what I thought was one of my best things I've ever done, and he basically said it was crap. But I later learned on he wanted to see my reaction to that. So It was kind of like they wanted to see, did I take criticism well, and how do I handle that? And so there's a little bit of a generational thing here too, but the draft was filled with people the same age. So, and you can see what the personality comes out when this happened. Instead of sort of being quiet about it and maybe trying to take the high road, they blamed the devil. Him and his dad blamed the devil. Sure. Who's the devil here? So anyways, we won't get into that. So the only reason I'm bringing this up is it does beg the question, if Dart was taken by, say, the Giants couldn't trade up and the Rams took him, or some other team like the Browns had traded up and taken him, or the Saints, would the Giants have drafted Shedeur at 34, or would they trade up again to try to draft him? So that's the question we'll never know. Was there people in the war room that said Shedeur is our fallback, or was he at that point where they weren't interested? I would love to know the answer to that. I don't think we'll ever know the answer to that. It's just a what if that we'll have to wonder. And it's theoretically possible Shedeur still ends up being the better quarterback. We'll have to see how this plays out. But right now, I think it feels like the Giants dodged a bullet. I think we'll see how people feel 3 years from now. But right now, it feels like we dodged a bullet.
Yeah, I think you would have to say the way things fell with all the other teams that I don't believe it's collusion. I think that's a bit of a red herring, but you can't tell me that Shane didn't talk to a couple of the other GMs and say, hey, man, we did our interview with Sanders and it did not go well. And someone goes, dude, I heard the same thing. Like, you're not the only team that it didn't go well. You have to know those guys talk, right? That had to make its way around. To drop to the 5th round, there were a number of quarterback needy teams. Now, Dave Del Cole just pointed out right here, right? So you've talked about, Howard, McCord, Ewers. They all went later. Dylan Gabriel, the guy with the least physical attributes of most of these quarterbacks, he's on the small side, doesn't have a great arm. He goes in the 3rd round. What's funny is he's on the same team with Shedeur Sanders. So that'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But you can clearly tell that the teams overall did not like this quarterback class.
One of my favorite parts of our live draft coverage was when you and I and Cy were all on together. And I said, holy shit, Gabriel got drafted by the Browns and Shedeur was still there. We were all like, holy shit. Because we knew right then and there the slide had become massive. That when you had Dylan Gabriel getting picked over Shedeur, the reaction, the look on all our faces was priceless. I was like, oh, we got to do that live draft stuff again. I would have, if we had gone back and done it, I would have loved to done it the 3rd day too, but like you said, we were on 10 hours. And by the way, hey Dave, we have to have you have you just to address real quickly what he said. I was talking to a huge Pittsburgh Steeler fan, and I thought Howard was where he went was a good option for them, given his style. I thought that was a good landing spot, and it does make me a little bit nervous that the Eagles were targeting McCord. I don't know if you saw any of the Eagles war room stuff that came out yesterday, but they were the guys that they were, how we know the Giants landed the guys that they were targeting because they were under 30 visits.
Sure.
On before the draft started on the 3rd day, the guys that the Eagles targeted, many of them were ones that they ended up drafting, and McCord was one of them. So I'm a little bit nervous. I hope they didn't get another player there. But again, the quarterbacks didn't. Dave brings up a great. And I want to talk about that later on with the offensive line when we get into this draft. But the quarterbacks went way later than most of us thought they were going to go. Way later. So it shows you what the NFL thought of these guys.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I don't worry too much about the Eagles had so many draft picks, by the way, in the second half of the draft. They were going to get people that they were looking for. McCord, to me, just he is what he is. I mean, Philadelphia is what they are. He means nothing to that.
You always undersell what the rest of the division.
No. But I mean, he means nothing. Look at the team, right?
I know that. But you know how the team is. They'll flip him for like a second-round draft.
Maybe. But I'll say this: they've cycled through backup quarterbacks like crazy. They don't really have anybody that if all of a sudden Hurts goes down, you're gonna feel super great with whoever they're gonna put in there. So I don't know. They're top heavy as far as their talent goes overall, but the backup players, if they suddenly had to start playing like their backup quarterbacks, that whole thing changes instantly. And McCord is a completely different quarterback than those other guys. So you're kind of like okay, that's one of those weird ones where your offense is weird one way, and you bring in a guy who doesn't really do some of the stuff that Hurts does. And so anyway, but I do like the Howard piece. It's pretty clear the Steelers, and I saw a thing come out yesterday that it sounds like they have a handshake agreement with Aaron Rodgers already, that Rodgers is dealing with some personal stuff. And when he's done, he will report, which we all talked about. This is a guy who probably knew I'm not showing up until maybe training camp's going to start. But that's not good for your team. But the Steelers have put all their eggs in that basket, I believe, because the way they went about the draft, that's pretty obvious. So
yeah, I'm glad it worked out the way it did for the Giants. And Andrew, this gets back to the question that I still have. Did the Giants feel that they had to have come out of this draft with a quarterback? I hope they didn't feel that way. In other words, I hope they felt, we will take now publicly they said that before the draft, but I don't know how they really felt. Did they really feel that they would have had to have come out of this draft with a quarterback? We won't know the answer to that. I hope. Some people like Shook. John and I weren't two of those people. He could end up actually being the most ready, given his age and his experience through the different systems. It wouldn't surprise me if he's the one who plays the earliest and does the best. other than Ward, because of his maturity factor. I mean, he's got 4 degrees, and I think he's married already. I think. I mean, so there is a maturity factor with him, and
he's already getting AARP mailing. So
yes, well, that's me. I'm getting things in my email for silver singles.
Nice. There you go. I'm
Yeah,
sure Mrs. BBI's not all on board with that,
all right.
but that's okay.
So big picture though, one of the things I wanted to talk about, there's so much to talk about with this draft. And one of the things I was thinking about was how this draft worked out for the Giants in the big scheme of things. Look, they were locked in, unless they were going to do something really stupid. They were locked in Abdul Carter, right? That was the obvious pick, right? So Carter was, and again, people, it's funny watching the grades because people are all like, you can't give the Giants a lot of credit for taking Carter because that was the obvious pick. Of course, we were all worried that, oh my God, the Giants are going to do something really stupid here and not take Carter. But they did the thing that they should have done. Thank goodness they didn't panic at quarterback, and they did that. We'll come back to Dart in a second. One of the things I would have ideally liked to have seen them done was still address more on the offensive line. But I went back and looked at the picks, where the Giants were picking and who was on the board today. So after they traded up, they have no second round pick. And we talked about on the first night of the draft that had the Giants not traded up, all the offensive linemen and defensive linemen that we were looking at 34 were off the board. I would, and I've said this 3 times now, I would have been really, really pissed if we didn't take a quarterback and the board had fallen the way it did, because the Donovan Jacksons, the Tyleek Williams, all those guys that I was targeting at 34, thinking that one of those guys would be there, had already been drafted. And I would have probably drafted a wide receiver at that point. I didn't want a wide receiver at that point, but all the linemen on both sides of the ball were gone. So they don't have a pick in the second round after they trade up. And so who was on the board? So when Darius came up, when it was 65, when we were at the top of the third round, and you and Cy and I were saying, who would you guys take? And I said, Darius Alexander. I said Joshua Farmer or Caldwell. I was all looking at all the defensive linemen.
Sure.
A lot of the offensive linemen were gone. So I went back and looked at, well, who did we pass on the offensive line? There were 6 offensive linemen taken in the third round. Dylan Fairchild was probably the best of the group. He's a guard, and he was taken at 81. So again, not quite 20 spots after, but he was taken at 81. Then Wyatt Millum, a tackle, but probably better at guard, went at 89. Emory Jones, the center that you like, I think you like Jared Wilson, right? You like, that the center that you like?
Yeah.
Caleb Rogers, and then our spot 99 was Charles Grant. I would not have taken any of those offensive linemen over Darius Alexander. If they had, I would not have been thrilled with it, because I thought Darius Alexander was way better than those offensive linemen. Most of those guys are guards or interior guys. And then when we came out, so when you and I and Cy were thinking about what would the Giants do the final third day, we were looking at the offensive linemen, and the only one that really stood out to us was Marcus Mbow. He was the one that clearly stood out. We mentioned a few other names like Jalen Rivers, but there only 3 offensive linemen went between the Giants' 4th and 5th round picks. And so this long explanation I'm giving here is after the second round, there weren't a lot of really good offensive linemen left on the board, and they got one of the guys that we were all talking about in the 5th round. So I still would like an offensive lineman, but this wasn't a great draft for offensive linemen. A lot of them did not get picked. There were 6 in the 3rd. There were only 3 between the Giants, the top of the 4th round and midway through the 5th. And then people took flyers in the 6th and 7th round on offensive linemen. So we talked about quarterbacks with Dave Del Cole earlier. The linemen didn't. They went fast early, but then after that, not a lot of offensive linemen got drafted.
I think one of the things to look at, right? Let's say the Giants hit it with Dart. If they did, 26 we talked about already, which I'm not always a big fan of saying this draft is this, because you just don't know until you get there. But by all sense and accounts right now, 26 is going to be a better quarterback draft. If the Giants hit on Dart, you now go into a draft where a number of teams are probably looking to move around to get a quarterback. If the Giants are not one of those teams, this is where you can benefit greatly from other teams' needs. Move down. And offensive lineman that may slide, defensive lineman may slide. You could easily turn that draft into a bonanza if you're smart, if we hit it here. That said, right, as we look through, it was a little surprising. As we went into the fourth and fifth rounds, right? So, and again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but so I did this interview on that Saturday a little bit, but I mean, it was more like I was really happy with just the way that, I mean, I gave the information that we've talked about numerous times, and when they suggested, so do you think the Giants are going to go offensive line here? It's got to be offensive line, and then it's going to, and I was like, I actually don't think so. I mean, I think that's the positions they're looking for, but I think they're going to go running back first, then O-line, because the O-line started to thin out, right? There were guys there, but it seemed to be more team specific interest versus this guy's is just so high up. And a lot of the teams that were picking at that point had grabbed some of those linemen earlier. So now all of a sudden linemen were dropping, and I felt like, well, the Giants are probably going to nail the running back because you're going to get maybe one that you have rated higher.
Right.
And then come back and get that offensive lineman. And Mbow slid, and I think mainly because of just his past injury history, pushed him down a little bit. So, yeah, the Giants looking, when you saw who was there, it just made sense that they would probably go in another direction. I'm with you, though. Darius Alexander, if you match later, I think they take him anyway, matched with some of those other players. Was just that much better and fit what we need so much better that he's a plug and play kind of guy.
This draft went so well for the Giants on paper. Again, we'll have to find out.
Right.
We got some criticism in the comment section on our last YouTube video. We're going, oh, come on, we got to see these guys play. What do you guys, again, we all understand that. We understand how the draft works.
Sure.
But on paper, this looks like a home run because it was, as John just mentioned, it was kind of predictable a little bit who they were going to take given the needs and who was on the board. And I guess that's what I was kind of trying to say. So Carter was pegged in. The Dart was the wild card. And again, we'll get back to that. But when we got to the third round pick, I thought defensive. That's why all my three guys were defensive linemen. I thought it was Caldwell, Farmer, or Darius Alexander, and Darius really stood out at that point. So I mentioned those before they were on the clock. And then when we got into the fourth round, you and I always thought that was the natural place. We did it on our pre thing. We always thought that was the natural spot for the running back because you and I kind of predicted this. We thought the running backs would kind of, except for the clear cut guys early, this was going to be the area where the next run would start. And that's kind of what happened. So the Giants kind of started that run, but Scadaboo being there then was sort of obvious. Everybody was doing this on social media and on BBI. Everyone was like, Scadaboo, draft Scadaboo. And they did. So again, people feel good that their opinion was validated. But again, it's funny. Every time you see a reviewer talk about the Giants draft and they mention the name Scadaboo, they smile. They can't help but smile.
Right.
Everybody loves that. We'll see how he does in the NFL, but everybody universally loves him as a player because he's just such a throwback. You cannot find a video where somebody's talking about Scadaboo and they don't start smiling. They instantly start smiling as soon as they say his name. And then again, if we'd been live, you, John, and Cy, and me would have all been, oh, come on, Bo's got a last tour pick. Please let Bo last tour pick. We all would have been like, oh, please. And we would have been freaking out like the last few picks. There's no way he's going to last tour pick. And he did. So this draft, and it left me kind of wishing the Giants had more picks. Now, because of the quarterback, they couldn't do it. And because once they did get picks again, like you wouldn't have wanted to trade down when they took Darius Alexander, because right after they took Darius Alexander, the linemen started to go again. The defense
Right.
started to go. So if the Giants had traded down, they would have lost Darius Alexander. And if they had traded down with Scadaboo, plus what do you get when you trade down in the 4th round? You wouldn't have gotten much. But if they traded down, they probably would have lost Scadaboo because the running backs really went off. So I left this draft with 2 feelings. One, home run. The Giants hit a home run. And the other was, damn, I wish we had more draft picks. I wish we were more like the Eagles when they got all these comp picks. Because I feel like the team, right, at least for this draft, was locked in. And I kind of wish they had like 2 or 3 more picks, and they really would have been able to do even more. I think they did a lot of good, and they did a lot of added to a lot of the team. But I would have liked to have been. I'm greedy. I would have liked them to have 2 or 3 more picks.
Well, I think the thing to look at when we look at the draft, right? We're all excited, and yes, I will fully admit, I'm very happy with the draft. It means nothing until they actually. Who knows? The Giants could literally have a bunch of guys that all of them fail. That seems highly unlikely, but we don't know. They haven't played it down. But if you look at the way the drafts are supposed to be, right, and what happens in a draft, did you walk away going, "Oh my God, who the hell was that guy that we took? Who knew Josh Azudu, right? Who thought there's a guy that the Giants can't believe they got him?" I'm going, I don't really know anything about Josh Azudu. We followed it up by getting Marcus McKethian, another guy that I didn't know a whole lot about. He was way down the bottom of the list for a number of offensive linemen. The Giants did that. The Giants traded before. They moved around. We got a small Wan'Dale Robinson. Yes, he was known. He was known out there, but where we got him might have been a little early for us. We trade picks to move up to get Jaylen Hyatt. He was known, but he was also kind of known as a one-trick pony. That was the big problem with him. He's a speed guy, but his route tree is extremely limited. So far, it's a one branch with the Giants with no catches. So you look at that, and I look this year, and I'm like, Darius Alexander was a known commodity. He was a defensive tackle that a lot of teams were talking about. Cam Scadaboo was a known quantity that a lot of fans were all about, and a lot of prognosticators were about, that this guy can do a ton of things. He lacks some of the measurables as maybe a Genti, but as Cy pointed out, there's not much difference with those guys in size. There's not a huge difference in speed. They're really a lot closer than people think. So you start looking at that, and then you get Mbow, who slid. And again, I think it's all because of his injury. I know there's a question. I put it on the screen. I don't think his arm difference of 33 and 32 makes a huge difference. Now, what we don't know is, and we won't know until we get into camp, do the Giants see him really as a tackle or a guy who can play tackle that they're really hoping is going to move inside and play either guard or center? Because I've heard he can play any of those. Well, we don't know that yet.
Yeah, and to answer his question, so I've seen a number of people talk about this. Whoever was doing the measurements at the combine, the combine was messing up. So apparently it was a league-wide thing. So they measured his arms at 32 and a half at the combine. It's crazy how like half an inch, that's what she said, can make a difference here. The Giants, Shane said they measured his arms twice, including, remember, he came in on one of the 30 visits.
Well, it was cold the first day.
And it was 33, and he said 30, there was 33. They said his arms are 33, that then they measured it twice. So his arms are legitimate 33. Now, ideally, people want 34-inch arms. Sometimes you can get bigger than that, but so I don't think I think the arm length thing is overplayed. I'm not even 100% sure John's correct about the injury thing. I know there was an injury thing, but that was so far long ago that I don't know why it would have impacted this, and nobody was talking about it. So I don't know why Mbow fell. Sometimes they just do. I still don't know why the running back from Miami Martinez. Yeah. I don't know why Martinez fell to the 7th round. That to me, that's a head scratcher. I saw Dave Delco talking about one of the guys that we like, Branch. He fell too. Some guys just fell, and they do it and everything. I think this was a really good draft for getting quality football players. I don't think there were a lot of superstars in this draft. That's why people only had so many first-round grades. But the 2 guys that we got in the 7th round have a legitimate shot of making the team. And again, these weren't people like we've done this before, and it doesn't mean anything either. But we've drafted people in the 6th and 7th round that we've never even heard of. You can't even find them in the draft guides. They're not even listed. But the guys that the Giants drafted this year were fairly well-known players. Even Corey Black was a fairly well-known player. And he actually it's hard to find negatives on him. So he's got size, he's got speed, he's an aggressive player. He's got to improve a little bit against the run, but he's got a legitimate shot to make this team. And Fedoni, that was injury related, and if he didn't have those ACLs, which he's 2 years removed from, he could have gone in the fourth or fifth round. So, and he's got a legitimate shot to make the team. So overall, I thought this draft was. I'm still, we're a week later, and I'm like, I just can't wait till we start to see, what are their numbers going to be when we finally start to see them in the spring and in summer. I just can't wait to start seeing these guys.
So speaking of that, real quick, since we are talking that, do you have an issue? So we had the fact that Carter first asked about 56, and the answer was no. LT said no, that ain't gonna happen. Then came up with Phil Simms. Now Phil actually said he would be okay with it, but he got outvoted by his family, who decided, no, Dad, you're not doing that. And so he's going to abide by what his family wants. Mm-hmm. So 56 and 11 are off. LT said, get your own number and make it yours. Banks reiterated the same thing. What are your thoughts? What number do you see that Abdul Carter getting? To me, 51 makes the most sense. Give him 51.
Yeah, it doesn't. You're asking the wrong guy on this. It doesn't. This conversation bores me. How I feel about the numbers. It's a little embarrassing once you've retired somebody, then to later on tell them while they're still alive that you're unretiring their number. I agree with what Cy and I were talking about when we were during the draft. The Ring of Honor seems to have largely replaced this. But if you've retired somebody's number and they're still alive, it seems a little I don't really care. I mean, to me, it's just I care. This stuff is to me is background noise, and I know people feel passionate to me, but they'll work it out. I mean, he's not gonna. It sounds like he's not going to wear either, so they'll give him a number. 51 makes sense. He has part of the 1 and part of the 5.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I know Neal threw out there 98. 98 was the number that LT wore in the preseason of 81. That would be very interesting to give him 98. Jesse Armstead's old number.
Armstead too. Yeah.
The one thing about retiring numbers, it gets really difficult. You start retiring too many numbers, and numbers are, while they changed it to a degree, they are still somewhat positionally specific. You really start limiting, like quarterback, right? Yeah. You're not going to see a number 50 at quarterback, or at least I don't think you will. But the Giants are running out of the low numbers to give to their quarterbacks. Someone said, "Oh, well, 15's already taken." I'm sorry, Tommy DeVito has no say in anything. If he's lucky, they give him a T-shirt with a number on it and say that's what you're going to wear during camp because you're ultimately not making his team. They can give Dart whatever number they want to give him. Tommy DeVito's number 15 is not going to hold that up.
Yeah, and whatever you guys do, and I think most Giants fans know this, don't buy any jerseys yet until training camp's over, because some of these numbers are going to probably change. My guess, John, is after Strahan and Eli pass away, well, you and I will be dead at that point too, but after they pass away, they'll probably get rid of all of these numbers and just say it's a Ring of Honor thing, is my guess. But again, it's funny. It's how it's a generational thing. I'm sure there are lots of Giants fans out there that are like, who never saw Lawrence Taylor play, never saw Phil Simms play, and they don't really care. They don't care about the jersey number. The big, give it to so it doesn't mean anything to them. It means something to the old guys who, if you were a Giants fan who had never even got a whiff of a Super Bowl, and all of a sudden Phil Simms is the MVP of Super Bowl 21. He's about as deified as you can get at that point. So people like John and I are going to hold that in higher regard than somebody who never saw, because it's like people today who say LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan. Well, then you didn't see Michael Jordan. You didn't see Michael Jordan play then. So, anyways, we're getting off track here. So, all right. So, you want to talk about any of the picks that you feel like you want to pick? We can talk about the undrafted free agents. We can take questions, but there's so much exciting stuff to talk about. I think that we could go off on any of these guys, even the late picks, the UDFAs. So.
Sure. I want to go with the tight end real quick. I'm actually really happy that that's the tight end they chose. Again, I did a couple of, I did probably hundreds, maybe not as many as you, because you were going full on simulator. I had done a bunch though, and late in the draft, I would get a tight end usually in the 7th round. I got a cornerback usually in the 7th round. I never took Black, but I did take the tight end from Nebraska a few different times, and he was always kind of right there at their pick. I think it was 219.
Right.
That's a guy, when you look at what they have right now, Bellinger's the one that's kind of he's on the bubble. It's pretty obvious. If you take the cornerback Black, that puts Flott on the bubble. And you could say, well, wait a minute, these guys have played in the NFL. I get that. But if the difference in talent is minimal, right, and it's just experience, neither of the other two guys have a ton of experience.
Right.
So it now comes down to dollars. Both Flott and Bellinger are going to get paid more as their contracts are coming to the end of their rookie deals. They're getting their higher pays now. That these younger guys coming in, if they're of an equal talent, Bellinger and Flott are out of here. It's pretty much that simple. I like this tight end, though. I want another guy that can be a receiving tight end. You've got Manhurt. You assume he's going to be the blocker. You've got Johnson. As long as he's healthy, that's the guy we're kind of looking for. I'm really looking forward to see this tight end. I want to see what he can do. If he can stay healthy enough, and again, I don't think he's going to have like a 10, 11-year career, probably coming with 2 ACLs. You probably have a limited shelf life of maybe 4 to 7. If the Giants can get 3 or 4 really good years out of this guy, and it helps, and he's that second guy, kind of like when the Giants had Bavaro, and he was after the injury of 89, he was somewhat of a shell of his former self. The Giants still had Howard Cross, was that late round tight end that started to play more. He started to catch some passes late in the season in 90. He was on the field a lot. He had a big catch in the Super Bowl. So this is a guy that I think you can bring him along behind Johnson. Now you've got 2 young guys. You've built that up, and they can both catch. They're a little different size wise. They bring a little different to the game, but I really like his play. And then I want to see what Black can do. I'm hoping he displaces one of the younger corners that really haven't taken that step forward. And Flott's a guy you keep hoping for, but he just doesn't have the body to grow into. He's just too thin to really be. He has to be in a very pass heavy league or division, and he's playing a lot of just cover and probably more zone than man-to-man, letting him freelance a little bit. He's just not physical enough. He can't play the game the way you want, and I'm kind of hoping Black can take his spot.
Look at those guns he's got right there. All right, and the other thing that's interesting, watching the clips on him, he's got the brace on the knee. So you can't really see it here, but it's on his left knee. But he had 2 ACLs back-to-back years. He's 2 years removed from that. He's had 2 full seasons, but that's why he fell. And he is very linear in the sense that he can run fast in a straight line. He's not really agile quick, but his catch radius is insane. He has really long arms, and he's 6'5", 6'6". He's in that range. He's probably 6'5.5". We used to have a tight end who just passed. Remember Tim Hasselbeck's dad?
Oh yeah. Don Hasselbeck.
Yeah, and Don Hasselbeck was a very, very tall tight end for the Giants, and this guy's a little bit like that. If you can throw the ball up to him, and with those long arms, and he'll just snatch it out of the air. Obviously, we need the knee. And it's interesting is the Giants got a up close personal view of him at the Senior Bowl, including on the coaching staff coached him at the Senior Bowl, including one of our scouts. So he's a legit. I think the Giants, there's a real good chance that Giants carry 4 tight ends. I think no one's talking about Greg Dulcich, who we got from Denver, who's a receiving tight end. And again, the only reason why Denver sort of kind of gave up on him was the injuries too. But if he stays healthy, he has a legit shot he was very highly rated and one of size very highly rated players coming out of the draft when he came out, still very young. And so he's in the picture. Bellinger's still in the picture. They got another tight end. I saw Bobby Skinner did a review on the UDFAs, and we should talk about them too. He wasn't very high on him, but I don't see the same thing that they saw on him. His name is Jermaine Terry. And when he came out of high school, he was one of these top-rated athletes coming out of high school in his college career that just didn't go the way it was expected. And he's an athlete. Now, Bobby was saying that he's not very athletic, but he when he came out, he was one of the top athletes in the country. And the sense I got was when he was in school, they just didn't use him enough. So there's a number of options here. Now, Terry's probably, if he makes it, he's going to end up on the practice squad. But they've got a number of interesting guys here. More of them are what you call F tight ends or move tight ends, and we call them H-back types. So they're the guys that you don't really want in line. Don't think of like Howard Cross and Mark Bavaro, but more guys that they use on the move and stuff like that. But they have a number of these guys, and I could see them keeping 4. So this is, to me, I always thought they were going to ideally come out of the draft with a tight end, and they did. And so to get him in the 7th round is a steal. He may not pan out, but this is a guy that most people I don't think expected to be there that late. So I thought that this was really good. But now Corey Black he's tall, he's fast, he plays aggressive. He's aggressive man press cover corner. He wasn't. You read the scouting reports on him, it wasn't like he can't play, that he was abused or anything like that. I'm left scratching my head why he was there in the 7th round. You can't find a lot of negative stuff on him. So he may not pan out, but he's got the tools that you look for. He seems like a good guy when I saw him interviewed. So I don't know why he lasted, but the Giants definitely have a need at corner because their backups right now are Trey Hawkins and Cordell Flott. If something happens to the other guys, or if Tay Banks doesn't play well, so he's a guy to look at, and so is Fortune, who was a UDFA. Or here, that was it. There you go. That was just timed perfectly. I did the picture, and John did the caption. Now, O'Donnell Fortune, I agree completely with Dave. I thought this guy was going to be drafted. Dave, who made me the mock draft simulator king, I took Odell Fortune a ton late in the draft in my mocks, and to have him there now here he is receiving the defensive MVP in the Shrine Bowl. So this was a guy at South Carolina who, again, he's not the reason why he fell is he's not the fastest guy in the world. But he was always around the football. He was always making plays on the ball. He was always picking the pass off. He's aggressive. Another guy like Corey Black, he needs to get a little more physical against the run. But both those guys could tackle. It's just they have to get better at run defense. But I could see a world where both these guys make the 53, or at least one of them making the practice squad and one making the 53. So to me, he was like another draft pick. I agree with Dave on this. So I was really excited. And on top of that, they spent money on the tight end. I'm sorry, tight end. That safety here, Makari Page from Michigan, who's a tall, I think he's 6'3", 6'4". Let me look that up real quick. Safety, which is really tall. Let me look that up real quick. Wait a minute. He's 6'3", 197, so he's tall and thin. He played in a bunch of different schemes at Michigan because, remember, the coaching change. So last year he was under Wink. He's a good athlete, and the Giants gave him some guaranteed money. And I also like they got the safety that they got out of Idaho. When I watch clips of him, he seems to be around the ball a lot. So I think they actually really did well in the UDFA class. We can talk about the wide receivers too, but on the defensive side of the ball in the UDFA class too.
Yeah, the good thing is, or not great for these guys, but good thing for the Giants overall, is you've got a lot of competition. You got a lot of good competition. So if any of these undrafted guys make the team, they've legitimately made the team. It's not a situation where the talent was so empty that an undrafted free agent can kind of just waltz in and he makes the team, and it's only because there really wasn't anything else there. If these guys do something and really show something, what it'll come down to is the bottom of the roster. And we talk about the the bottom of the roster churns constantly. The Giants have spent too many years, though, where they're churning the bottom of the roster. The bottom of the roster really was like 25 to 30 deep. That was a problem. That we were churning, you know what I mean? We were churning guys, but injuries and everything else, you're literally, you're just, now we're talking maybe to 8 to 10 tops at the bottom. But some of these guys, it's going to be salary that's going to say it. And if these guys show something, you're going to knock a guy off who's going to make a little bit more this year. That if talent is fairly equal, the Giants are going to roll with the younger guys. And they, once again, are going to have a fairly young team overall. And that's actually really good. The other thing to look at, too, for some of those guys and some of the later round draft picks, the tight end, they're going to get a lot of playing time with Dart. Dart is going to be the guy right now. So they're going to be able to develop some chemistry here, and the Giants are going to be able to see early on, this guy might be somebody we want these two to kind of move together. I will go back real quick to one thing you mentioned on the tight ends. Keep in mind with Dulcich, here's the other thing that's really important to remember. Who did he play with when he was first into the NFL? He played with Russell Wilson. His first touchdown catch, Russell Wilson, was a 39-yard touchdown catch. He had, I believe, 33, 39, something like that, receptions that year before he went on injury reserve. So he has a connection to Russell Wilson. So there is a familiarity there. So now I'm not saying it's a big one. It wasn't a lot, but every little bit helps when you're when you're on a new team and you've got somebody else who Dulcich was with the Giants last year, so he kind of knows what the Giants want to do, but he knows Russell Wilson too. He played with him. So those things, they do matter.
And that's a good catch, John. I guess I should have known that. But yeah, he's a guy, Cy might correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Cy had him really highly rated coming out of that draft too. So I would not discount him. The question on which UDFAs by Andrew, it's a really good question. And there's a lot of these. The problem with UDFAs is this, is when you see them, people look for the names they recognize. And it's funny that sometimes the names that you don't recognize are the ones I joked about it when we gave him an award. When Rich Soibert was a UDFA with the Giants, no one had ever heard of him. And so everybody's reaction to him was, oh, this guy's not going to make it. He's camp fodder. And so when we gave him the award at camp, I said, you were the guy that everybody was saying is not even going to get out of training camp. So we don't know. So I'm prefacing my remarks, Andrew, saying we don't really know. I'm going to quickly go down the list. But Rashawn Baker, the running back from Elon, his highlights look pretty damn good. He's a big physical running back. Now we're loaded. When I say loaded, we have a lot of bodies at running back. I don't see him making the 53 unless there's injuries, but I could see him making the practice squad. They signed a ton of wide receivers, and they seem to be broken down into two categories. Tall guys like they don't have on the roster right now, and that's Bo Collins, that's Juice Wells, that's Daquan Felton. I was joking with John, when I hear Daquan, I think of Napoleon Dynamite. What is it? Daquan's dance moves or whatever it is. But Daquan Felton, 6'4". He's 6'4". Antoine Wells is 6'1", but he looks taller than that. Bo Collins is 6'3", and the other guys that they signed are more quick slot guys like Jordan Bly and Nate McCullum. And if you look at these their highlights, they're not bad players. So I know people have said, well, Juice Wells isn't going to make it. Well, he's got a relationship with Dart already.
Yes.
And exactly. He's not a bad player. You look at his 40 time and it seems like he's, not ideal, but he doesn't play that slowly. Some guys don't play to their 40 time. So some people really like Bo Collins. Some people, the Giants gave, of all the UDFAs, the one that they gave the most money to, guaranteed money, was Daquan Felton from Virginia Tech. So they obviously see enough. They almost gave him enough to just keep him on the practice squad already. So the wide receivers, I think one of these wide receivers has got a really good chance to make the 53. And I think a couple of them at least could make the practice squad. They signed one guy who was one of the best special teams players in the country. They say he's a future. He's so smart. He's going to be a future coach. It's Dallin Combre from Louisiana. He holds on field goals, extra points. I think he had the most or second most special teams tackles in the country. you can't completely discount a guy like that. The offensive linemen are the hardest to project. So far, we know that they've signed 2, or they supposedly have signed 2. We'll have to see. The Youngstown State guy, obviously, that's more like a Rich Soyberg thing. That's a big jump, and he probably needs work in the weight room and all that, but he's a decent athlete. Trace Ford, the outside linebacker, his injury history is horrible. He had 2 ACLs, 1 on each knee, and then another year he had a fractured kneecap. I can't even imagine what that feels like. But so you think his knees are shot, but then he plays his last year. His coach loved him, and he tested at the pro day as one of the best athletes at the pro day. So we'll see. There is a need for, again, another, someone to replace a Tamon Fox on the roster. And we already talked about the corners, and we already talked about the safeties. So it looks like a really good class. Who's going to make it, I don't know. But they obviously felt like they needed another wide receiver. If the Giants had another draft pick in this draft, I'm pretty darn sure they would have drafted a wide receiver if the value had been there. Because the fact that they've signed all these wide receivers tells me that's what they want to do. My guess is going into next year's draft, it's going to be offensive line and wide receivers is going to be the Giants' big emphasis in the next year's draft.
Yeah, I mean, unless somebody comes out of nowhere and develops and whatever, you're absolutely right. I think we have a lot of numbers right now at wide receiver. I think the talent after you start with Neighbors, right? Slayton is obviously right now the number 2. Wandell is numbering them is kind of weird because Wandell is very specific. He's not going to be the guy you're just going to start outside. He's the inside guy, so he's really 3. After that, it gets really murky. There's Hyatt, which all intents and purposes, where the Giants drafted him and what they expected from him, he should be 4 or higher, but he's not. He's borderline going to make this team if he makes the team. Then the rest are kind of the same. There's a lot of guys. They got some vets. They got a little bit more size to them. They play some special teams. If I'm Bryce Ford Wheaton, I'm pretty nervous with all the guys that they've brought on board and some of these undrafted free agents. I actually think the undrafted free agents at wide receiver, I would not discount Wells at all. Right. That connection to Dart is huge. And if they can show that, if he can even play marginally well and he can do something else, because he's going to have to be able to play special teams too, he can displace one of those other guys at 6 or 7, depending on, that means even on the practice squad, or somebody else at 5, 6. It's weird the way it is. Running back, we're a little bit loaded in terms of we've got 3 guys probably that make the team. Singletary is the question because of money. That becomes if the Giants decide that the money isn't worth keeping, they might go. But really, we carried 4 backs last year? The Giants probably aren't going any deeper than 4. You've already mentioned they might go 4 tight ends. That limits the number of other positions. But when you talk about it wide receiver, though, don't forget Victor Cruz was an undrafted free agent.
He was a camp invite.
Yeah,
he was like Elijah Chapman. He wasn't even signed before mini camp.
I totally agree, Andrew, that for Neal, it's obvious. They've made it very clear. They declined the option. This is it. They've now made the comment, the statement, he is moving to guard. That is the thing. He's going to be playing guard. Evan Neal could legitimately be an absolute game changer for the Giants roster-wise if he blows it up this summer and they're just watching him pancake guys in the running game. He's never going to be super great in the pass blocking game, I don't think. But if he can dominate the running game and be functional as a guard in the passing game, he brings that thing that we've talked about before. If you want to go back far enough, he brings a William Roberts type move. And you can go back a little bit even before Roberts. People forget Brad Benson was a starting guard for the Giants before he became the starting left tackle. He was a guard, and they moved him to tackle. Guys get moved sometimes, and that just happens to be where they bloom. If Neal can dominate as a guard, it takes all the pressure off the Giants in a number of areas, because now you've got a guy who, in worst case scenario, you could put him back to tackle if you had to get through a game or 2 games, and he might not be great, but he knows how to play it. And maybe some of it's confidence, and then being a guard might help them there. But at the very least, that gives them a physical presence that they haven't had at guard in a while. I just wouldn't count on it just yet.
One of the wildest things in Giants history is that Brad Benson ever became a really good left tackle to the point where he won Player of the Week. I think it was the first
offensive player of the week,
offensive lineman ever, I think, to win Player of the Week, because he looked like the kind of guy that the first guy you'd want to get rid of, because he didn't look the part at all. This was an era when offensive linemen were like 270 pounds too. You know, it was really, you had a really big offensive lineman if he was 280. That was like,
right.
You know, so John said it perfectly, and it's funny that he mentioned it. Again, I'm feeling a little giddy because of the draft, and maybe I shouldn't. And the beer is helping too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a potential game changer, as John said, if Neal ends up being a really good guard. Because what's the biggest need we need right now on his team on offense right now is still to solidify the offensive line. And I would add, you know, it would be nice to have another really good wide receiver.
Sure.
But we have to worry about blocking the Philadelphia Eagles. Evan Neal, say what you will about him, is a huge man. He's a huge physical presence inside. If they can get him to play anywhere near his ability at guard, it is a game changer for this entire offensive line. Because at that point, then everything else to the left and right of him changes too. So that's one of the big storylines, I think, going into this into the summer is, can Evan Neal handle that spot? The problem is, and we've talked about this over and over again, you can't physically block people in the spring. It's not allowed. So he can't put his hands on another person during the OTAs. So we're not going to know until the training camp. And in training camp, you only have so many padded practices. So he'll have a few padded practices, and then he'll have the preseason games. I would play him a ton in the preseason, and I'd give him every chance to win that right guard spot. I know they like Van Roten's leadership and the chemistry he brings to the team. But right now, what I'm thinking is we got to find out if there's any future at all with Evan Neal. I would not give up on him this year, but I would certainly give up on him if he doesn't do anything this year. And if he is like struggling at second team guard in camp, maybe he doesn't even make it out. I don't know. But if he can do what John's saying, it really is a game changer for the Giants on the offensive line, because he's exactly within. He's a big, strong guy still. His problem has been pass protection at right tackle. So we'll see. There's a reason why he was drafted in the top 10. And again, it wasn't just us; it was everybody had him up there.
So I'll put this up on the board here for Paul. I can answer that. Moore was drafted as a tackle.
Who's a tackle?
He was the first tackle for the Giants, taken in '88. Then Elliott was the second. They went offensive lineman. He just did not do well at tackle. He just didn't. He was more of a William Roberts kind of guy. He had kind of the feet to play and stuff. He just didn't play as nearly as physical as you would really want him for a guy coming out of the Big Ten at the time. Elliott's big thing was they didn't think he could play. They stay outside. They were worried that he was too slow-footed, and that's why he slid down in the draft. But he ends up, he failed horribly, by the way, at right tackle in his first game against the Dallas Cowboys. He gave up, I believe, 4 sacks to Ed Too Tall Jones.
Who terrorized us. Too Tall used to terrorize
for years. Later in that season, though, he gets moved to left tackle. William Roberts then is moved to left guard, and that changed everything. The right tackle spot was changed a little bit earlier, and you can go back and look this up. I know it's written somewhere. One of the big things that made that change was LT complained to Parcells, complained to the coaching staff, your tackle over here, because at the time I believe Carl Nelson was injured again. I don't know if he had a recurrence of the cancer, but he definitely was injured, and it was out. The Giants tried Elliott, that didn't work. I think they tried Moore over there, and LT went to them and said, that Riesenberg guy plays pretty well in practice. That's the guy. So Doug Riesenberg comes in. He becomes the right tackle. Elliott becomes the left tackle. Roberts becomes the left guard. And that changed everything with the Giants offensive line. That was ultimately what led them to the team that the 90 with that offensive line. They added a little bit in the 89 draft. So anyway, but Moore was a tackle.
And the thing with Evan Neal too, I keep seeing people saying it's about time that they moved him to guard. Problem is, and I keep saying this, Neal was hurt all through the summer and into the first part of the season. He wasn't even practice. He couldn't practice, so they couldn't put him at guard because he couldn't practice. And then when he finally came back, he got hurt again. So part of Neal's big problem has always been, even if they want to move him in the past, he was always hurt. So in order to move him, you got to be healthy so you can practice. The guy they really fucked up was Azudu. I still don't know what the hell all that was, because everyone's forgetting about him, and maybe his confidence is completely shot at this point. I don't know. And we should talk about, when we talk about Dart, why Dart, I think we had questions earlier about when will Dart play. You just don't want to throw some people to the wolves so early. And the weird thing about Azudu was they kept putting him in the worst possible position. And look how it culminated. Last year, they put him again at left tackle, and he was so bad for one game, they immediately yanked him. His confidence has got to be in the toilet at this point. I shouldn't say probably. He might have ended up being a pretty decent guard. But right now, he's probably got no confidence at this point. And that's what I worry about Evan Neal, is where is his confidence level right now?
Well, the thing with Neal that bugs me the most, and I said this last year during the summer when we talked about it, I don't understand why we didn't leave him on the pup. If he was not ready and he wasn't able to practice, there was really no reason to keep stringing it along and then have him come in with almost no practice time. This is a guy that struggled horribly the year before. And now you're hoping that out of nowhere, and he looked bad early on in the preseason on the little bit he got to play. You see, he still wasn't right. Guys were getting around him. They should have left him on the physically unable to perform list, and they didn't. And that's totally on the Giants.
And part of this was too, the Giants had more guards than they had tackles at the time too last year. So they had Aaron Stinney, who they specifically signed for a guard, and he was the first guy to come off the bench. Now, when they got into the second half of the season, and they were obviously out of it, Neal should have been playing guard, but then he got hurt again. So it's just that's part of his problem, is he can't stay healthy either. The worst news we can get on Neal is, and I said this on another podcast, in the spring and summer, if we hear he's hurt again, then it's like, all right, this is enough.
Then he's gone.
Now, last thing on Hyatt, I did see Carl Banks channeling me a little bit on Twitter, where he said, don't give up on Hyatt, especially with the advent of the moon ball coming. So again, I agree with Carl on that sense, that if Hyatt's going to do it, it's going to be with these quarterbacks. If he doesn't do it with these quarterbacks, then he doesn't have a future. So this is he's got the perfect quarterback thing. That includes Dart too. But Jameis and Russell all love to throw deep, and that's Hyatt. So we'll finally see once and for all if Hyatt's got anything.
Were you surprised though that Carl included that Hyatt had the best hands of the wide receiver group? He had that in one of his other tweets. He had the best hands.
The crazy thing about Hyatt is he's made some really insane catches. So he's got that in him. But we've also seen him drop some that he shouldn't drop. I don't think hands are a big issue for him. I don't know what his big issue is. I know he's not overly big, so he probably has issues with press coverage.
He lacks physicality.
He's not a physical guy. But the people related to the Giants, like Carl, keep saying it's not an attitude thing, and it's not he doesn't want to work hard thing, and it's not a talent issue. So we'll see. Again, you and I have said all along, let's see what some of these wide receivers like Wan'Dale and Jaylen do with a real quarterback. So we'll find out fairly quickly with Russell Wilson if it's a wide receiver problem or if it was a quarterback problem.
So I was going to say right there. So with what you just said a second ago, right? With what the Giants say, it's not an attitude problem. It's not a talent problem. It's not a won't work hard problem. It's not a this problem.
Right.
Well, when you eliminate all those things, what's left? It's got to be the guy throwing the ball. I mean, that's the only thing.
coaching, one or the other. Yeah.
Which as a coaching staff, you wouldn't say that. So it would have to be the quarterback. So we'll see. To Neal's question on the cap, until they start announcing some of the restructures, which I have to assume they're already doing, we won't really know. I think we were like $1 million or less than $1 million that we
We
had
need a cap
available.
room, and everyone's speculating Burns. They'll restructure Burns, it seems like.
Well, you had Burns, Lawrence, and Thomas are the most obvious ones. Now, what I don't understand is why are we carrying Nunes Roches? He brings nothing to the table overall other than extra cost. There are other guys on the team that have done just as far as being a Giant, have played and proven just as much as he has at a far lesser cost. I don't know why he's still on the team.
Well, there's no, unless they need, I mean, unless they're desperate, there's no need to cut them because, again, injuries can happen. Somebody could tear an ACL. And so unless they need to cut them for some reason, there's no need to cut them yet.
Well, but you do have a need, though, unless you want to restructure those other guys again and again and again.
Well, they will. Well, yes. Well,
it gets a little tricky when you restructure them 2-3 times in a row.
Well, the other thing is they may not, you and I feel differently, but they may not think the same way about Nunes Roches that you and I do.
True.
Too. So
True.
We'll see. I saw somebody in a podcast on YouTube, and they were saying, oh my God, look at the Giants defensive line. And they were listing off the names that you and I would name, and they threw Nunes Roches in there. I was like, wait a minute. This is a good transition. I want to talk more about this young man, or they'll say he's too old. He's 25 years old. Anyone under 50,
right?
It's a young man to me. Darius Alexander here. So you and I talked about this a little bit, but I've been watching more clips, and I've been watching more people who really like this. So people are like, oh, Toledo. And I think MS brought it up on BBI, and he was saying, well, he was in the MAC, the stats are okay, but what are you talking about? Guy, they couldn't block him at the Senior Bowl. Okay. So I saw somebody talking about, this is a guy that if you leave him one-on-one with people, it's going to be a problem. And that's why a lot of people are starting to say, holy hell, about the Giants defensive line, because you've got to account for Dexter with 2 people. Now they add Abdul Carter, and Brian Burns is a problem too. But this guy is going to get one-on-one situations right now, and I think he's got a legitimate shot to start sooner than later. And I think he's got a legitimate shot to be the guy that you're seeing on the highlight reel more often than not on the Giants, because I think he's going to be the guy that other teams don't spend as much time focusing on, and I think he's going to potentially eat that up. This is a really, really, and people are going to say, well, he's a 3rd-round pick. What can he do? Justin Tuck was a 3rd-round pick. This guy is super, super talented. He's got really long arms, and he's big, and he's mobile, and you can move him all over the line. You can move him. You can play him at left end. You can play him at the 3 technique spot. He even played some nose in college. He's not that kind of a player in the pros, but you can move him all over the place. He's played some edge in terms of like being even farther out on the end. He's that athletic. So this guy is another guy like Abdul Carter. No one's talking enough about him and Abdul together on this defensive line. So I'm really excited about this. I just hope everyone stays healthy and everyone stays together, because the fact that they came out of the draft with him and Abdul Carter is huge.
I'm totally on board with you there. I think the pieces that we have right now on paper just look so much better. Paul, to answer your question, and I have to go back, I'm trying to dig through my memories. I believe Keith Hamilton was a 5th-round draft pick. There were
not that low, I don't think. 4?
No, he was definitely.
I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, I might be wrong, but it's no higher than 4. I think it's 5. There were questions on Hamilton's off the field stuff.
Well, he used to drive around Jersey with the dark window windows on his car. You already got pulled over for that.
Well, there was some, I want to be careful how I say it.
Yeah, I know. You got to be careful.
There were some questions on his off the field stuff. I thought for sure he was a later driver. I'm going to double check, because maybe
I'm checking right now. Yeah, he was arrested.
4th round. You were right. 4th round.
He's been arrested in 2003 or 2003. He was arrested for cocaine. marijuana, drug paraphernalia, and he used to drive around with the darkened windshield.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So I liked him when he was on the
Fourth
Giants.
round, fourth round.
Yeah, he's a 4th-round pick. So
Yeah.
the hammer. His questions really were a lot of it was off the field stuff. He was a bigger guy. He keep in mind it was a different NFL, right? He was really a 4-3 guy. He was a 4-3 defensive tackle guy. Could be a 5 in a 3-4 scenario, but he was really more designed for the inside. The hammer was. He was quite the defensive line addition for the Giants at that time. But yeah, it's questions of his off-field stuff is really what pushed him down.
I think they drafted him that we were still playing the 3-4 and we're just changing to the 4-3. And he was a hell of a football player for the Giants. The two things with him is this. So when he was drafted, Paul, it was very atypical for the Giants because he was not the boxy 3-4 defensive tackle type, the Leonard Marshall type, the
the Eric Dorsey,
John Washington type, that Eric Dorsey, that kind of. He was a taller, more linear guy that we weren't used to, so it was a little unusual. But the guy was a badass, so he brought an attitude to the defense. He was somebody that you didn't really want to mess with, and he was an enforcer on that team, on those teams. So when those teams got better with the Jesse Armsteads and the Michael Strahans, Hammer was the badass dude on that team. So and if you watch his highlight, I think one year he had 11 sacks.
Yeah, he did. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was it he was the one called for the holding in the Super Bowl on Armstead's interception?
Oh, that was bullshit.
I know, but I'm just saying that was the guy. I'm pretty.
Yeah. What a bunch of talk about a game. Talk about a play that completely changed the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, Dave Giants probably still lose that game, but that was bullshit.
And I'm doing some of this from totally from memory. Didn't we have Robert Harris too? Harris and Hamilton playing next to each other for a while.
Harris was later. Were they together at one point?
I'm pretty sure they were together on the line. I don't know if it was then. We also had the Peters from Nebraska, the guy with a lot of off the field crap. We brought him on during that time. Chad Bratsky. We had Chad Bratsky on the outside.
We used to call him with Jason Peter, the girlfriend. Was it Jason Peter or was that his brother? He had a brother too.
Jason Peters was the offensive lineman for the.
Yeah. So what was Christian Peter? Christian Peter, the girlfriend Peter. I guess I shouldn't be laughing at that.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it was bad.
But which brings us to Mr. Scadaboo, who I got in trouble with. People told me I picked a picture last time that was showing his junk. So that was for the ladies.
Thank God I didn't pay enough attention to the picture.
I know you must have missed that.
Yeah, I guess so. Sorry.
Criticism on that.
I did take a shot though, because you threw out the piece about him fumbling. I had not heard that, so it did catch me. And yeah, so Mike in Ohio, I know you don't like me. It's fine. I'm totally okay if you dislike every single thing I say. But the point is, until he's shown to be a fumbler in the NFL, you can't call him a fumbler. We don't know anything yet about him. We do know that Tyrone Tracy for the Giants, if he doesn't shore that crap up, he's not going to get the playing time. He's got to take care of the ball. That was a really big problem from him last year. I think Scadaboo is a much more physical guy. So you still, as you get in closer to goal line, it'll be a Singletary. It'll be a Scadaboo. I think Tracy's going to be more of the between the 20s guy and more of the home run threat. I also think they're going to want to not increase Tracy's workload. You want to maximize the results that you got, the same results from last year, but you want to minimize his workload. He's not a big guy.
I love our backfield right now. I love our backfield. I just think this is fantastic. I can't wait. I just wish we had more of a smash mouth offensive line. I'm big year for John Michael Schmitz. Big year because he's coming off an injury with our Runyon. He's coming off an injury, Runyon at left guard. Big comeback for Andrew Thomas, but I love our backfield, and I can't wait. I can't wait. Singletary's got to be a little pissed because I can't imagine he's going to see too many touches. I would carry 3 running backs. I wouldn't carry 4. I'd carry 3 with these guys. I can't wait for this group. So,
three with a fullback, or just 3 backs. Period.
I would strongly lean towards 3 running backs and keeping somebody on the practice squad again, like Eric Gray. No one's going to sign Eric Gray. If you put Eric Gray in the
Right.
practice squad, no one's gonna sign him.
True.
If you have a fourth running back, what is he doing? I mean, what's his purpose on his team other than depth? Because all your carries are gonna really go to Tracy and Scadaboo, with Singletary being like, if somebody gets hurt, guy. I would carry more tight ends at that point, but we'll see. We'll see how this. I mean, who else are we talking about on the running back roster here? We're talking about, we got Tracy, Singletary, Gray, Dante Miller. So Dante Miller is gonna have to fight to make this team, and I like his speed, but he might. I mean, I don't see. Do you see Dante Miller making this 53?
No.
Again, he's another guy that probably would make this practice squad, though, right? Someone's not going to pick him up.
He didn't get picked up last year, so yeah. I would say yes.
So better comparison for Scat. John had different thoughts on this. He thought he saw Ahmad Bradshaw on him. Yes. When I watch him play, I don't know who he reminds me of. I saw somebody the other day. He said, it was somebody who played for the Buccaneers, and he said he reminded him of a more athletic Mike Allstott, but I don't see that either.
No. First off, the only thing they have in comparison-wise is the fact that they're both white. No, Allstott was like 245 pounds. He was a freaking tank. Scadaboo's not a tank. He runs hard. He runs like Bradshaw. Bradshaw ran bigger than he was. He had that weird choppy style with his feet too, and you see that a little bit with Scadaboo. He had better balance than you would have thought for a guy like the way Bradshaw ran. He had much better balance. Charles Way is a different guy. He was more of a one-speed guy. He was a true fullback, but he could catch. He ran very well between the tackles, but he had no speed whatsoever. It's a huge. To me, Scadaboo is more like Bradshaw than Way by far.
Charles Way was a strange guy because he didn't run fast, but it seemed like he always was able to get the corner. So he was one of my favorite players. And it was funny because when they drafted him, I was like, why the hell did we draft a fullback? We already have one. It was like Kenyon Rashid or somebody we had at the time.
Yep.
And nice.
There's a callback.
And I was like, why are we drafting a fullback? And I think he was a 6th rounder. And I'm like, and he ended up being one of my favorite. And I think they screwed up his knees. If I heard it right, they didn't. He tore a knee, and I don't think the surgeon did a very good job on his knee. But he was an amazing player in the sense that he wasn't fast, but that didn't seem to bother his game. I don't know when I watch Scadaboo, he looks so short to me. He's like 5'9", 9.5 or something like that, but he's so damn short, but he's built so low to the ground. He looks like he's tough to knock off his feet because of his center of gravity. I don't know if I've ever seen a running back that runs like him. When I watch him, he doesn't remind me of anybody. I understand what John's saying with Ahmad Bradshaw because of the physicalness, but I don't see that. I mean, Bradshaw could run away from people too, like that great run in the snow in Buffalo. Yep. I don't know. I don't think he reminds me of anybody. I don't know. Maybe somebody can bring out another one, but also brings us to. Our draft would look a lot different if I thought this was a great picture because this is Darius Alexander they're blocking. The guy who's got his hands on him is Zabel, who you and I and a lot of other Giants fans wanted, and that's Marcus Mbow. This is at the Senior Bowl. So you've got Alexander, Zabel, and Mbow all in the same photograph. I thought this was a great shot here. And this is a really big draft pick for them. So if they had drafted him in the 4th round, we wouldn't have been upset at all. And the Giants said they were thinking about drafting him in the 4th round. So, and this is a big deal. I mean, this is a big deal to get him that late in the draft, because if they hadn't gotten him, I think all of us would feel a lot more depressed about the Giants draft and the quality of the offensive linemen that they might have drafted. I don't know why he lasted that long. John has speculated it's the injury issue. I don't know, but there's been no recent injury issue. He had a severe leg injury early in college, I think.
Yes.
So I don't know.
At one point, there was feeling that at the time it could have been career ending. That's why I'm thinking the depth of the injury, it may limit how, some teams thought how long he might be around. So
right. So this is a big deal because what John mentioned, he can play guard, which he did. He can play tackle, which he did. So he's played right guard and he's played right tackle. And he experimented and has been practicing at center. So he can play all over the offensive line. I would not be shocked if someday in the future he's our center. I would not be shocked if he's our right guard. I would not be shocked if he's our right tackle. And the Giants said, Dable said that he's going to start off at right tackle. So if he comes in and he does really well, do they start thinking, do we shift Illuminor to right guard? Is another thing. My guess is Mbow is going to need a year in the weight room. That's my guess.
Yeah.
But they're going to, right now, I would guess within about sometime in the summer, he's going to be the second team right tackle, is my guess.
And you look at it, right? I mean, this is another guy that where you got him, it's a little bit of a surprise. There was thoughts that he would go a little bit earlier. This could be a home run pick. And I don't mean like, oh my God, you got a, 4-time, 5-time all pro. I'm not saying that. If you get a guy where we got him and he becomes a legitimate NFL starter, he doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler. He could be a legitimate NFL starter. You've now hit a home run. He's cheap. He's good. It allows you to build around him, and he's relatively young to grow for a number of years. That's a big deal. And the fact that he has position flexibility, this guy really could project to play inside. He could be a center with the way he can move with his overall height and arm length. He gives you a little bit more size at center, a little bit more, and his feet make him very adaptable to playing pretty much on either side of the line. This is a guy that if you hit it, this is a big win for the Giants. Almost like if Neal works out at guard, that's a huge win for the Giants. Now you've got Illuminor. You could do whatever you want with Illuminor. If the Giants had an injury again at left tackle, you don't wait. Illuminor immediately goes to left tackle. The Giants would have flexibility within that line. If these guys can come in and play, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, and he's really athletic. So I got into an argument with someone on the website. He said, well, he didn't test, so he must be trying to hide something. Everyone who's seen him play sees what a great athlete he is. So his thing is he's got to get a little bit bigger and stronger, and that's typical. But again, John and I like throwing out old names. We've lived through when the Giants drafted David Deal. We've lived through when they drafted linemen later who ended up being important parts of this franchise. You just mentioned who was the lineman that you just mentioned? Riesenberg. You mentioned Doug Riesenberg. I mean, we can go.
I believe he was a 5th round pick, by the way.
We go down. So just because somebody, and this guy, to get him there again, when it's not just John and I coming up saying this after the fact, when we were on live during the draft, we were like, oh my God, Marcus Mbow is still there. Marcus Mbow is still there. And it wasn't just me and John. Cy was saying the same thing. So we were when we signed off on the second day of the draft, we said, Mbow's still there. Maybe he's the guy that we took at the top of the 4th round. And to get him in the 5th round, it was like, whoa, So I like the draft overall. I thought I'm still very, very happy about it. I think the only negative I can come up with in the last few days to me is I look at the rest of the division and they all drafted well. Everybody in the NFC East, I thought, had a pretty good draft. So I'm worried about how much did we close the gap. We'll see, but I don't think you can criticize too much the picks. Oh, we didn't really talk about Dart. Should we talk about Dart? Or before
Dave had a question for you. I threw a question.
Oh, sorry.
If we didn't trade up, who would you have taken at 30?
Yeah, I said this before. Cy said the same thing. At that point I was looking at the wide receiver. What's his name?
Burden.
Luther Burden was the guy that I probably would have drafted at that spot. I didn't like any of the offensive linemen there. I thought it was too early for Alfred Collins. What makes me a little bit nervous, John, is the people that we like were drafted by teams that know defensive linemen. The Eagles drafted Ty Robinson, who I know you
I liked
a lot.
Yeah.
And was it the 49ers? I think the 49ers drafted was it Collins? They drafted Collins, the 49ers?
I'm trying to remember. Who ended up with Jack Sawyer? Do you remember?
Steelers. That was such a Steelers.
That's a perfect.
So is Caleb Johnson, the running back. The Steelers had such a Steelers draft. They don't have a quarterback right this minute, but
Wow.
Steelers.
He's busy probably drinking some special tea somewhere. Hallucinating about all the failed relationships that he's had and why it's all their fault.
I saw someone, but Paul, I saw somebody who said, oh, I'm sorry, it was Dave before. I saw somebody who said it would not have been out of the realm of possibility that in their mind, this was a non-Giants fan, that they might have considered Alexander at 34 for the Giants. So when he was covering the draft, there were a lot of people who had Alexander way higher. When I say higher, I said like 40, like around, on their board, he was like the 40th best player. And remember, the Giants were picking at 34, so that's only 6 off. So all the Giants picks except Dart went earlier. Oh, and Carter too went later than they were kind of supposed to go. So that makes you kind of feel good. So.
Well, and the other, the question, I want to do Paul's question too in a second here. The other question becomes, who did the Giants have as you mentioned it earlier? Who did they have as the third quarterback?
We could do a whole show on this.
Well, but who did they have as the third quarterback?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question?
No. So I'm still sticking with what we were just talking about. Who you would have taken at 34 before we do Paul's thing. So let's say that if the Giants came into this draft wanting a quarterback, then the question becomes, who was the third quarterback? If it's Jalen Milroe, which was my guy, there's a possibility the Giants go Jalen Milroe at 34, or Shook if that's the guy that they had. Whatever. We'll never know. They're not going to tell you, well, if we didn't get Dart, we were definitely going to take a quarterback. We had to get a quarterback. You don't know, but I would be kind of worried that they might have said, we're getting a quarterback no matter what. They wanted Dart, but if they didn't get him, they were going to get somebody. And
don't you think there's a really strong possibility it would have been Shedeur at 34?
I think the second that they didn't get him at the bottom of one when they spent so much time with him, that I think he had been removed from their board. That would be my feeling.
I don't know.
I think there's something happened, and the fact that both sides have now kind of let out a little bit. The word has come out. Sanders was mad at the Giants. The Giants were not happy with Sanders with the way things went. If it was coming from one side only, that could be like, retroactive justification for a decision already made. But when it's coming out from both sides, there seems to be some legitimacy that something happened in that meeting that did not go well at all. And I don't think you come back from it and go, hey, we don't like him here, but 20 picks later, that's fine. I don't think so. I think he was either thrown way down or he was thrown off the board completely.
I would like to think that he was not on the board at 34 because of where he fell. But I can't move past the fact that the notion's still in my head that if Dart had gone and he was still the third option for them at that point. Again, I don't know. I'm not saying. I just wonder where. So that's what we started off the show. I said, did he completely erase himself from the equation or not? Was he still a fallback option for them if Dart was gone? So the good news is this: let's talk about Dart a little bit. Well, let's answer Paul's question. Paul, we could do a whole show on this, and since we're going into the summer, maybe we can do some history shows a little
That'd
bit.
Be fun.
Well, we could spend a whole show. What New York Giants draft blanks? Well, clean up my language right now. Blank. Let's say blank ups. John, do you want to at least name one?
Well, I mean, right off the top of my head, and I think part of it was just that feeling of like the connection to Notre Dame, the fact that we had gotten Bavaro, the fact that we love using tight ends. When the Giants drafted Derek Brown, that dude had all the freaking skills that you would want as tight end. In college, he put up some amazing plays. I believe he was 6'6". He was like 250 pounds. He could run. Everything that I've ever heard, that in one practice, LT busted his face mask and it broke his nose, and that was pretty much the end of Derek Brown being physical about anything. That's one rumor that was out there. But that guy never developed into anything. Like it was so bad that you wondered, how did he even get considered in the first round? But that was a guy I thought when they drafted him, I'm like, he's got the skills. He's going to fit this team. We got a really good tight end, and he turned out to be nothing.
Evan Neal, too soon?
We're still in it. We're still in it.
Ron Dane. Holy crap, the leading rusher in college football history, and he comes to the Giants, and you see, and again, they're the Thunder, the original Thunder and Lightning. By the way, I saw a comment earlier, somebody saying Scadaboo catches like Tiki. Scadaboo, I think, catches better than Tiki. Tiki was a good pass receiver. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the highlights of Scadaboo running down the field and like over the shoulder catches. I mean, that's the kind of catch a wide running back doesn't make. But anyways, we could do a whole show on this. I mean, we talked about the other day. Tyrone Wheatley was supposed to be a, we could go on and I'll say right now is the guy that when you saw him coming out and you saw the highlights and you saw how big he was, he seemed like such a New York Giants pick. And Tiki was struggling then. Remember, Tiki hadn't completely gotten over his fumbling. So when they got Ron Dane, it looked like that was going to be a big physical New York Giant kind of pick for them, and it just didn't. But we could go back to the 80s, we go back to the 90s. We could do a whole show on this.
Well, I had Canavis McGee. I thought for sure coming from that Colorado tandem of Alfred Williams and Canavis McGee, he would come to the Giants.
Williams, yeah.
He would come to the Giants, and McGee was going to be that guy. They could put him on the outside and develop. He did nothing. Clint Sintum, I never cared for him at all. I couldn't believe they drafted a 3-4 guy after we had switched to a 4-3, and they tried to put him at weak side linebacker. That was the worst.
Yeah, we could do. Yeah. I can tell Paul Kelly wants the whole show on history with all his questions. All right, let's finish because we're running late here. Let's just finish with Dart because ultimately shouldn't be completely judged. The draft isn't going to be completely judged on because if Abdul Carter turns out to be a historical player for the Giants, we're not going to just judge this draft on Dart. However, if Dart is who they hope he is, this and this is not hyperbole, this could end up being the most important draft in Giants history because they would be getting a game-changing defensive player and a game-changing offensive player in the same draft, and that theoretically could still can happen. And Dart has grown on me. I came into this draft not really wanting a quarterback, but the more I look at him, the more I like the personality, the more I like the skill set, the more I understand why he's the pick. Like I said at the beginning, if you haven't gone and watched the Gruden show with Dart, I really recommend it. It gives you a really good idea on his personality. I like the way he handles himself. I like the way I just like the way he carries himself and he doesn't make excuses. And he's a very, very passionate player and he seems to be a leader. So I'm very excited about this pick. I kind of wish we would see him sooner than later, but I don't think it's a good idea if we see him too much this year.
No, I agree. I think what will be interesting though is if he develops quickly and I don't mean to be a starter,
right?
But if he develops quickly during camp, what happens is we get into the middle of the early portion of the season before the trade deadline. If a contender loses their guy, we've got two veteran quarterbacks. Jameis Winston becomes a tradable commodity for the Giants that you could pick up a third, fourth, fifth, whatever pick it might be, because you won't care at that point. You're playing for the future. If Dart shows that he can be the number 2 guy early on, that veteran becomes a tradable commodity for us. I don't think he'll be pushed to number 2, but if he shows enough that he could be it, if that opportunity pops up, the Giants would probably do Winston a solid and give him an opportunity somewhere else. And of course, you get the picks for next year. Remember, we got to recoup a third if we can that we gave up this year to move up. So it'll be an interesting thing. Dart's one to watch. Carter changes everything on the defensive side of the ball, though. I mean that guy will. If you're going to say Devon Thibodeau be anything, it is going to be because we brought in Carter, and there will be very little attention paid to Kayvon. Burns, Carter, Kayvon's going to be the third of those 3 guys. That gives you such a formidable deal. So I'm excited.
Nunez Roches. What if again, because I'm feeling good, what if Dart looks like Russell Wilson did his rookie year in Seattle and is the best quarterback in training camp?
and legitimately beats him out. I mean, or you think
legitimately beats him out. Yeah, I'd trade Russell Wilson then.
But here's a.
I'd keep Jameis and trade Russell at that point.
I'll reverse the question to you though. Would Dayball and Shane and I would assume the Maras, would they want to pull that trigger so soon? Or do you go, we see a guy with a ton of talent, we know what we got.
Right.
I'm not putting him in yet. I don't, because if you do and things remember when Eli came in, the Giants had a winning record, but they were 9 games in and the offense was sputtering a little bit.
Right.
They tanked for the rest of the year until the last game of the season. Eli had some high games. The Pittsburgh game where he had a shootout with Ben Roethlisberger, they ended up losing by 2, I think, in that game. But they lost. They were absolutely obliterated by the Ravens. He couldn't do anything against the Falcons. We couldn't put up any points there. The Bears beat us. It just was not good. If you put Dart in and he struggles like that, which is very acceptable for a young player to struggle,
right,
you potentially ruin his confidence and you get the fans going all against you. I think they're going to roll with Wilson as far as they can go in the season.
I saw an interview with John Schmelk interviewing the guy from CBS. I can't think of his name. Ryan. He covers the draft. He's pretty good. I actually recommend that interview too. It came out a couple of days ago. They were covering the Giants draft. I think his name's Ryan. And he was asking John as many questions as he was getting in terms of the Giants. And one of the things he just threw out there, he said, when I look at the Giants, I see a team that can win 8 games. And but he didn't know who the Giants schedule was on the Giants schedule. And John brought that up. John Schmelk brought that up. He said, well, given the schedule. And he said, well, what are you talking about? And John rattled off the home games. And he said, oh, dear Lord. So, and I know you don't like to talk about this, but I'm the one who is focused on this. Our schedule is a son of a bitch. It's awful. It's terrible. So the question is do you want to, what I'm trying to answer your question is do you also want to throw Dart into that meat grinder too and wreck his confidence? It's a murderer's row. If you look at the home games in particular of the teams that we play, it's like, holy crap. But if he's like one of the best quarterbacks or the best quarterback in the summer, the sooner he plays, the better. Do I expect that? No. I expect Russell Wilson to probably be the guy. But say this guy picks up the offense faster than they thought. So you're not the only one who thought about trading Jameis. I saw a discussion on it on another site where people were saying, and this was national media, they were saying, well, maybe the Giants, like Cleveland's going to have to do the same thing. Cleveland's got way too many quarterbacks right now. They were thinking, well, does Cleveland now turn around and trade Pickett again or Dalton? Because they can't keep four quarterbacks on the roster. And they brought up the Giants and they said, do the Giants end up trading one of the veterans if Dart looks really sharp in camp? And I hadn't thought about that. It's not unrealistic. I don't expect it to happen, but what if he looks really good in the spring and the summer? So at that point, who do you trade? Do you trade Jameis or do you trade Russell at that point? Because Russell's got an ego. Remember, Russell's not here for to hand off the reins to Dart. He's here to like reinvigorate his career. Russell thinks he can play another 5 years. He's not playing over he's not like even Aaron Rodgers, who Aaron knows he's only got a year or 2 left. Russell thinks he's got a lot of years left.
And again, regardless of what anybody will come right out and say, Dayball and Shane have to win. They don't necessarily have to win. So, Paul, your question: if the Giants go 4-13, the only way that Dayball would survive that is if Dart was the starter for those 17 games, and they were competitive. He looked good. He improved. They won some games. They lost some really close ones, but they happened to lose 13 games. If Russell Wilson's the starter and the Giants go, 3-10 early on before you put Dart in, Dayball's gone. It's that simple. They have to win games
anymore. I think the quarterback saved him.
It only saves him if he plays. If he doesn't play, you've lost nothing. He's just sat on the bench the whole year. Me personally, I say he's got to play, but I think they put a team together, though, that should win some games. I know we talk about the murderers row. I'm not as on board as everybody else is about the doom and gloom of who we play, because every single year a schedule looks bad until you start playing it, and one of those teams isn't so good this year. Somebody falls off. Washington's going to come back a little bit, played over their heads a little bit last year, and no one is going to take them for granted this year. So you got to deal with that. You've got other teams. Philadelphia, let's be honest, they won a Super Bowl. Super Bowl teams don't do so well that next year. They always have a little bit of a regression. They might be the antithesis of that, but they very well could mimic that. They have a lot of stuff going on. I just think that you don't worry about the schedule so much per se. It's really when you play some teams. I think as Wilson plays, if they win 6 or 7 games and they're competitive in most of the games, Dayball comes back.
I don't think it matters when you play the Eagles and the Chiefs. Those are losses. So I disagree with you on that. And I also disagree that I think Daboll, and then the Giants collapse completely. I think Daboll's saved because of the Dart pick. Because Greeny Green real quick. Yeah, because he didn't take snaps under center at college. But if you watch interviews on him, he's going to work his ass off on that. But that's a big issue with not just him, but with a number of the quarterbacks that were in this draft. A lot of college quarterbacks don't take, and it's not necessarily taking the snap, it's the drop back. So it's the footwork on the drop back. So it's taking the snap too, and it's also getting your footwork down on that. So he's going to have to spend every day, and I'm sure he is, between now and the beginning of the season on practicing snaps and his drop back. I'm sure that Giants have already given him like sort of a routine to go through to start with this. There was another question too, real quick from you brought up Paul Kelly.
Yeah,
people get hurt. That's what you put it in there. That no one's going to trade from now, but some quarterback's going to get hurt.
And the Giants won't make the mistake of even thinking to trade right now. Dart's proven nothing. So we're saying is if he proves during the summer and then you go into the season. Now it's interesting.
Let me just. I'm sorry. One thing. If they get to August, let's say the 21st, and Daboll comes into Shane and says he's the best quarterback in camp, we're having a different conversation. Sorry, John.
No, you're fine. And I saw this from Stephen Lawrence. I saw something or heard something the other day that I thought was borderline hysterical. That came from Bob Papa, who said, listen, the Giants still have DeVito. They see something in this guy. He's played. They like him. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There is no way that they signed Wilson, Winston, draft Dart because they think Tommy DeVito is something to keep on the roster.
Why was he on the roster last year, though? I mean, this is what I don't understand about this regime.
Well, last year, I mean, we had Drew Lock, and I don't understand what happened there. You didn't want to play him either.
Why did once DeVito was healthy again, why didn't they go back to DeVito? Because you knew the season was over and Lock was gone. They weren't going to resign Lock, and we want to find out more about DeVito. Why didn't they play DeVito down the stretch? And that could have affected the Colts game.
Dear God. Listen, the draft worked out. We're okay. Remember, we're okay.
I know. So anyways, but I think Dart, you and I will disagree this. Unless there's a complete collapse, I think Dart sort of, I'm not a big Daboll guy anymore because I think he has to prove himself, but I have a real problem of allowing him to draft your quarterback and then firing you. To me, that would be stupid. And so in this case, again, this year, in January, you and I were like, maybe he should be gone. Maybe they should get rid of him, especially if they're going to draft a quarterback, because if you draft a quarterback and you fire him, then the new regime is stuck with the quarterback. Well, here we are. So at this point, I'm like, well, you're stuck with him for at least another year because it sounds like Daboll picked this, right? Daboll picked this quarterback. Is that where we are?
Oh, that's what it sounds like. Absolutely.
Right? So how can you fire him now? If you fire him, then what are you doing? You got to give him at least you got to at least have Daboll have Dart play the position before you fire him. So I don't know if Dart plays this year or not, If he does play this year and he's awful, then that's a different. Rookies quarterbacks usually struggle, unless again there are oddities like Dan Marino and Jaden Daniels, but usually rookie quarterbacks have issues. But if I mean Eli Manning was not good his first year. He only won one game as a starter when they finally did put him in. So,
but Paul makes a good point here, although it was a little bit different because Shermer was only in the second full year. After they went to Jones, they come back. They're 2-2. They beat Washington. They're on a high. That team goes just downhill from there. And you could say, well, why wouldn't you bring them back? You had Jones, you had your rookie quarterback, all that good stuff. I would say this: the Giants would have to collapse for Daboll not to come back, but I do think they have to win more than 4 games. If Wilson's your starter the whole year, it's got to be more than 4. They've got to be closer to 6, 7, 8 wins for that to be comfortable. Anything below 6, and I think you started Wilson the whole year, you're on thin ice. There's a good possibility to ownership, and maybe even Shane. Remember, we're not sure that Shane and Daboll were on the same page. I think Shane is safe no matter what. Daboll's not so sure.
The irony is the guy who's really that maybe hold the fate to Daboll is Shane Bowen. Because all the pressure in the world is on Shane Bowen right now. So this is going to sound a little old fashioned, but if you have a team that plays really good defense and can run the football, you're going to be in a lot of football games, and you should win almost half your football games, regardless of how your passing game does. If you can run the ball and you can stop the other team, you should be in games. We have the talent to be a top 10 defense right now. I'll go on record right now. This is a top 10 defense if the coaching staff can get it out of them. Right. But this defensive line in this secondary is awesome right now. We have a little bit of a question with Tay Banks, so we have to hope he rebounds. But they're loaded in the front 7, and they're loaded in the secondary right now. Everyone stays healthy, and that's another big thing. Everyone stays healthy or relatively healthy. This is a top 10 defense, and it's not just me saying this. You watch a lot of these, again, people who are not Giants fans all this week. Oh my God, look at the defense the Giants have put together. So if you can stop them, if you can stop the other team, and Scattaboo and Tyrone Tracy can run, and they can just get respectable quarterback play, somebody who doesn't turn the ball over, they should be in a lot of football games.
All right, so we get it. I said I threw it up there. We'll do a 2-minute countdown. We're going to call a 2-minute warning. I'm going to keep a close eye on it. It's 2:02 now. We will not go past 2:05. So I'm giving you a little extra. Do you want Kafka or Daboll calling plays?
Well, it sounds like Daboll's going to be calling them again. So I think
but do you want that though?
Neither has been good at it. I don't care. I mean, right now, to me, I just want it to work.
I think I feel
Kafka because I think Daboll needs to focus on the team. I'll say Kafka.
I think I'd rather Daboll in this case because if this truly is his offense for once, I want to see it with the quarterbacks that you want to run your offense. I want to see what it's like when you don't put the constraints on because you're covering for a guy, which clearly we now know they covered for him a lot. Dave, 2 minute means 15. Yeah, no, I know. I know how it goes. My wife said, I told her we're going to keep it to a tight one. She goes, sure you are. Yeah. So I think Daboll kind of has to, but at the same time, I still wonder, why is Kafka here if you're never going to let him do anything? Right. I don't get it.
Anything else?
Let's see. Neal asked, does Wilson want to call his own plays? Has he in the past?
Yeah, he was having problems in Pittsburgh with the offensive coordinator that you like, in that he was changing the offensive coordinators. Is it Smith?
Arthur Smith.
Smith. He was changing Smith's plays, and that apparently was one of the big reasons why Smith didn't want him back, is he didn't like him changing the plays.
to Paul, the history episode. Eric and I have talked about it. I think we're going to.
I'd like to get Matt and SGS and Larry on here for that too.
Yeah, that would be fun. And I think we might even be able to do more like, let's talk about a particular season, but we can certainly pick some games. Like, I mean, I can go pretty much on any game through the 80s. So that's no problem. But yeah, that'd be a lot of fun to do. I think, there's a couple different ways we could take it. We do want to do some breakdowns of the positions a little more. Like right now we're talking draft, but we do need to look at, as we head more towards, especially when we get closer, is starting to go to camp, what positions are, who's there, like what battles do we see, and you still might see a signing or two. I've seen it constantly posted elsewhere. I don't know if you've seen it, Eric. There's all this talk that people think the Giants are going to be in play for Brandon Scherf, the guard who's still out there. I have a feeling the Giants aren't spending
that.
I've seen it online in a number of spots.
Well, did you catch Shane's press conference when they were talking about they was asked about why they loaded up on defense in the free agency and it looks like continued in the draft, and his response is it's kind of what you and I said. When we did our free agents preview, there were so many more defensive free agents in free agency than offensive ones. He said that dictated where we were going. So again, kudos to the Giants.
Yeah.
They looked at who was available and said there are way more defensive free agents that are good than offensive ones, and that's where they put it. He said, look, if who's the KC guard, Trace Smith, the guy that they franchised, I can't think of it.
From Tennessee. Yes.
Right. From Kansas City, though.
Drafted from Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who had the blood clot issue
he said, like he had been, but they also wanted the Colts guard. So I don't think, so the Giants clearly still wanted to add an offensive lineman in free agency. So the Scherf thing, I guess, could be realistic because he just mentioned guard, and again in the press conference when he was talking about, and we know they were interested, they were poking around the Colts guard, Freeze or Fries or whatever it is.
Yeah. I'll say this: if they do sign Scherf, that is an absolute horrible sign for Evan Neal.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah,
that'd be terrible for him.
That would be pretty much
if they sign Scherf. Yeah. Because why are you signing him at that point?
Right. Because you've already got the veteran in Van Roten. We've signed a couple of guys that can play guard. Worst case scenario, Mbow, if he had to play tackle, you could shove a Luminor back to guard. We have a number of guys who could play guard. If you go get one, you've already decided Evan Neal's not making the team as the guard.
Where did Scherf play last year? Was it Jacksonville? Where was he?
I think it was Jacksonville. Don't quote me, but
he used to be a hell of a football player. But
he's had a number of injuries too, now, like nagging injuries. Yeah. So I think with that, unless you've got something else.
No, I know we went long, but I'm excited. I'm like when we get off here, I'm going to go upstairs and watch some more football.
Nice.
I'm really excited. So
yeah, it feels good. Now, of course, this could all come crashing down and all that good stuff. But it's at least we didn't come out of the draft going, God, I can't believe that they did this, or why did we trade all this for a guy that nobody else seemed to be interested in? It worked out. The trade for the quarterback worked. They didn't overpay, but they went and they were committed to getting a guy they wanted, and I like that. And that wasn't even the guy that I was hoping for. But if that's what they believed and they did it, and you were adamant, you were pounding the table, do not give up 65. And when they did that trade and we kept pick 65, that really showed that, okay, they did this very smartly. They let it come to them.
And it could have been way, way worse, because I saw the clip yesterday, and that even again, my wife was going, what was I yelling about? I saw a clip of Roseman in the Eagles war room when they found out that Atlanta had traded up with the Rams, and they said, well, what did they give up? And they all reacted to the fact that there was a first-round draft pick in that. And I said, oh my God, can you imagine if Shane had given away next year's number 1 to get Dart? So it wasn't just 65. I mean, I don't know what Atlanta was doing. I don't. Why would you give up a first round next year to move up at the end of the first round this year? That's another discussion. But it could have been way worse. If we had come out of this draft and we had given up next year's number 1 or next year's number 2, I would have been not happy. I'm pretty happy right now because they didn't even give up, like you said, 65. It was 99. So
right.
And remember, and again, it's not me saying this in hindsight. When we were alive, Cy misheard you, and he thought you had said they had given up 65 and 99, and you said no, and you slowly repeated it. It was 99 plus next year's 3. And
Right.
you could see my face go,
Yeah, it's like,
God.
what?
You know, so yes. So anyways, so I'm happy.
So with that, you know, like, subscribe. We're almost at 1,200 subscribers, so I appreciate that. The views are up over 124,000 total views altogether. So it's been a lot of fun. We got a lot of things we plan on doing. So with that, I'm gonna call it an end. Appreciate everybody, and we'll catch you again real soon.